Well, first of all, are two brilliant minds of India, two former cabinet ministers who shaped policies, implemented them, proved a point that India can do as good as it deserves. Having heard them, probably I can say that I agree with everything that they have said. And that's the least I could say. I must thank all of you for being here because, as you know, economy can be managed by somebody else, but economy is everybody's concern. And that's very evident from the fact that the biggest hall of IMC is full with people, and that's why there are many more who are waiting in the other rooms looking at the CCTV. So that shows the interest of the people and how much they're worried about what's happening in India. In fact, just about 2 days ago, the Pew Center, which tracks the public opinion of the world, pointed out that India is the only country in the world among the 17 that they survey, the largest, the most important countries in the world, the biggest drop of the people of that particular country in the economy of that country is the sharpest in India. There is no other country in the world which has lost so much of confidence in the economy in such a short time. And that's the reason why we thought that we must find out the alternative to the policies of the present government. Because it's not a failure of India which is the cause of this. It's a failure of the government which has contributed to the decline of public faith in the running of the economy. And that's why, as Arunji said, and I'm sure he knows a bit of astrology, that the government of tomorrow must think about the problems of today. And that's how I'm very happy that we are all here to talk about it. And I'm really thankful to IMC for making it happen. I'm sure there will be many more such events outside Mumbai, in different parts of India, where we'll be able to actually go and talk to people and get people involved into this process of governing India. I know that nowadays there are some ideas become cliches. So people are talking about the policy paralysis for this government. So I was just not being a doctor, being a chartered accountant like my great friend Shailesh. I went to a doctor and asked me, what is paralysis? He said, paralysis means half the body functions. So when you look at this government, I don't think it's paralysis, because then at least half of that should be functioning. It looks like a complete coma. It cannot be a paralysis. Because this seems to be, there is an absence of government. And one has to really go and find out where the government is. At a time when, in economic management, there has not been as many committees, as many councils, as many advisors as this government has appointed. Mr. Yashwant Sinha will tell you that when he was a finance minister, he had only one economic advisor. But the Prime Minister never had an economic advisor, the number of those who are now present in this particular government. And now, the problem is, there are so many advisors, so many councils, and there is no economic policy. And I think, really speaking, this is the root cause of the problem is that, as you pointed out, that there is no leadership. And when there is no leadership, we want to find out how we can have many more institutions who can be blamed in an event when there is a failure, and there are failures all around. And that's the cause of the problem. And I must really feel, as you were saying, that it's a time when we all really think together in terms of how we can change the situation. Because we ourselves coined these ideas. We said, we have a dream team which is now looking at India's economic policies. I think there is no team to begin with, because team means they work with a common goal. In fact, today we have seen that there is the time for good astrologers to come and play a role, because we have seen the Prime Minister, the Finance Minister, the Deputy Chairman, Planning Commission, who are always given different forecasts about when the inflation is going to fall, and every time they have said that the inflation has gone up by 2 more points. So I think there is a time now to get more good astrologers into economic planning, and I think the economic planners have a good time now to go and retire so that they can actually get the people who can really run the economy properly. So this is a unfortunately, a situation, and as I was saying, that this is the time when people are thinking it's a failure of a country, which is causing concern. I recall and remember very recently, there was a failure of India's national grid, in a regional grid. It failed first in northern grid. On the following day, second grid failure in the same grid, as well as because the other grid failed, that I must also go Sati, because that's a tradition. So other grid also failed alongside. And the two grid failure on 2 consecutive days, all the top newspapers of the world, all the TV channels of the world, this was the big news, the first news in all these channels. And what was the news? The news said that the 2 grid failure shows that India's dream of becoming a superpower had tripped. It's not tripping of power, but tripping of grid, because how can you be superpower when there is no power? And that was the question that was uppermost in the minds of many people. And in fact, that is a cause of concern, that it's not the government. And in fact, I had to talk to so many countries because our minister said there is no problem. You go to US, the grid failure happens all the time, and there is 6 days the grid doesn't come. The US people are surprised that what a news they are giving, because we never see 6 days of darkness here. But when the minister said that, they had to find out somebody else who can speak, so I was called as a former minister to talk about it. So my first assertion to all of them was that please try to distinguish between a government failure and a country's failure. This is not a country's failure. The grid can be fixed. We have the capacity, as we have the capacity to fix the economic problems of India. And that is why we are all here to find out how we can really make it happen. This, unfortunately, as I said, that's a complete example of lack of vision and complete lack of action. In fact, this power sector, just mentioning power, so I'll just continue with that. And in fact, our president and also the chairman of this committee, they both had organized an interesting event about immediately after this, what the solution? Because that's very important, how to fix the problem with a solution. But for that, we must know the problem. This is a very classic case of power sector in which, till 2002, everybody wanted to quit power sector. All the foreign industrialists who came to India wanting to set up shops, they wanted to quit. The similar situation now happening in economy. In economy, we are on one hand want more FDI to come into India, but the real challenge is not to get more FDI into India, the real challenge will be how to prevent Indian capital from going abroad. Because most of the industrialists want to go and set shops abroad. So it will be a very classic case. You go on a roadshow to US, inviting capital into India, when the other Americans will tell you, oh, very good news, because yesterday only we had 2 or 3 top industrialists from India wanting to come and set up their investment into United States. Same would be Europe, same would be in Southeast Asia. So the issue is, in 2002, everybody wanted to quit the power sector. We made the law, and I'm really thankful to my 2 great friends, colleagues in the cabinet have supported it, because it was a very radical law. The Electricity Act 2003 changed the whole thing. We are not even producing 20,000 megawatts for 5 years. We started producing 20,000 megawatts in 1 year. In last 5 years, we added almost 55,000 megawatts, only because of one law. And what is the proof of this? That to 98, we could not produce, from 1948 till 2002, no private sector could participate unless they have a license. But we completely delicensed power sector, and we said anybody can come and set up investment into generation. So automatically huge investment came. Billions and billions of dollars of investment was not only committed, was actually getting implemented. And then we came with a classic case of fuel not getting tied up. The distribution, which again thanks to Mr. Sinha, who was a finance minister, supported me as a power minister, and we had completely cleaned the balance sheets of all the state electricity boards. And now again, the state electricity boards have got 2 lakh crores as accumulated losses. Nobody is going to put investment into generation because there is hardly any chance of getting the money out when you sell that power to the distribution company. So this is a very classic case of how we are actually playing like typically a cricket match. We are playing at 200 for no loss when only 20 runs to be scored in another 20 years, and we lose the match. And this is how we are classic case of one example of how we actually, the just lack of vision and no action. Same can be said of road, same can be said of telecom, same can be said of water. In fact, water is one of the biggest challenges of India, which is not going to make India's growth story work, forget a growth story for India to survive, because the type of challenges that we are facing in water. Our Prime Minister then, Mr. Vajpayee, and I'm not trying to make a political statement, but the first Prime Minister probably in India who thought about water as a national priority. And in fact asked me to look at solving the India's water problem in a very comprehensive way. I had prepared a blueprint saying that how these 13, 14 ministries will be surprised. There are only 13 or 14 ministries we deal with water in India, only 13 or 14. And those ministries, how to combine, how to make a unified action plan, that's what we did. But this government, unfortunately, lost it. And lack of continuity. In fact, Mr. Sinha just mentioned about a very interesting legislation that our government had brought it, was the Fiscal Responsibility and Budget Management Act. The act was passed, and then there was a change in the government, because there was an election. The new finance minister, the present one now, he was in that time as a finance minister, stood up and said, we swear by this law, but because there's a change in government, the implementation of this law, because there are two very critical provisions, the curtailing the revenue deficit and curtailing the fiscal deficit, we are postponing it by 2 years. In fact, I remember in the parliament having got up and said, please don't do this. It's like saying, I am definitely going to stop drinking, but after 1 week, let me drink as much as possible in the next 1 week. And this is how the lack of continuation, because FRBM alone would have helped to actually bring down the cost of governance, because automatically the interest rates were curtailed, because you could not have borrowed more. You could have had to reduce our revenue deficit. That in turn would have curtailed the fiscal deficit and also borrowing of the government. And all that would have changed into a very interesting scenario which was prevailing in 2004, in which low interest rates, high savings, more investment, and that's how we could really see a different economic growth. Unfortunately, we lost that, and therefore now it's a challenge how to make the government, the economy work again. And I'm very sure the ability of our country is definitely going to be there to rise about it. But as I said, it's very correctly, is a leadership issue, because there seems to be not only lack of leadership, but there seems to be a complete prevalence of a civil war in leadership. Because there seems to be that every minister stands up to say something exactly the opposite of his other cabinet colleague. And that is what is really causing so much of confusion, lack of coherence, and that is the cause of many problems that we are facing today. So we really need to stop the long-term damage that we are causing to the economy in terms of saying that everything available now is available for free. And that's why nobody wants to swear by the fiscal prudence. And now everything is free. Power is free. In fact, first time, after several decades, we had stopped free power in India. In fact, between 2001 and 2002, there was not a single state government was giving free power, because we had stopped free power. And the first, when was it changed? It was changed in 2004, when along with the union government which was sworn in Delhi, there was also parallelly, because after the same time at general election, there was the Andhra Pradesh assembly which went for election. So then Chief Minister Y.S.R. Reddy, who took oath in public, because there was a huge crowd, he signed his first file as a Chief Minister is to give free power in front of everybody. I recall having gone to the UPA leadership and telling them, please stop it, because you could not again do it, because we have taken all the blame of stopping free power. If you start giving it again, there will be a chaos. But now, we are not stopping at free power. You have to give free medicines, free mobile phones, and everything free. And I think this is something which is causing a more long-term damage to India's productivity, India's ability to be actually competing with the rest of the world. And I think that's something which is a more serious issue that we really need to look at. I think we have to have the political consensus, with the point that Mr. Shori pointed out. But let me tell you that political consensus needs a leadership again. Somebody has to go and reach out, and that's the job that must be played by the ruling party. I remember when we were making the same Electricity Act, all the states were up in arms. All the trade unions had said that they will not allow the law to be passed, because this is something which is against our interest. We went and talked to each and every chief minister, each and every political leader, and that's how we could arrive at a type of political consensus that was necessary. Today, what we are seeing in case of GST, the goods and services tax, in fact, nobody wants to go and talk to the opposition, because it is now become a new mantra, is to blame the opposition. I think that's not going to solve. Like the opposition should not be only criticizing the government and not trying to be stalling it. The same way the government also should not try to indulge into this so that there will be a proper political consensus that can be reached. And for that, I think we really need to find out how this new culture that can grow in India. And that's something which is really required as a prerequisite for economic growth, because if there is no political consensus, it will not happen. I will recall one very interesting instance. There was a very contentious legislation, which was not really legislation, but contentious policy, which was going to be pushed through the parliament. And that was the civil nuclear deal. And that time, it was with the United States. US was equally or probably more important to push it, I think. And therefore, every time there was a big US legislative delegation used to come to India, including Nancy Powell, who was then Speaker of the House, they used to call the members of parliament from all parties and talk to them. And of course, there are discussions which used to take place. One of the Congress MP, very senior MP, told me that why United States can talk to us all the time. The senators come, congressmen come, the secretaries of state come, talk to us, and now the Speaker of the House is talking to us. But why is Prime Minister of my own country not talking to my own party MP? Why is not trying to do that? I think that is something which is really required to go out and build bridges so that we can really come out with this. So I'm very sure that our ability to grow again at 8%, 9%, and even 10% is certainly there, intrinsically there. What is really needed is to put policies in place which can actually make it happen. And therefore, it is not a question of not just losing a plot by design, by default, and not by something which is India's fate. I think we can really make it happen again. And to make that happen, I think we will need to put proper policies and ability to implement those policies into reality in a very transparent manner. And if we do that, I'm very sure we'll be again back where we were there in 2004. I'm seeing better than where we were in 2004 because a lot of years have passed.